To understand the essence of influence, one must first confront an unalterable truth. Power and wealth are inseparable. There exists no other tool as universally respected, feared, or desired as money. It is not merely a token of trade or a means to satisfy ephemeral pleasures. It is the lifeblood of authority. Those who possess it command attention, dictate terms, and shape the destinies of others, while those who lack it are subject to the whims of fortune and the machinations of the more prepared. Wealth is not an accessory to ambition. It is the foundation upon which all authority rests. Consider the realm of human interactions. Relationships, negotiations, and alliances are never entirely neutral. They are invariably influenced by the presence of resources. When one holds the means to reward or punish, to elevate or diminish, one holds the threads that determine action. The individual with wealth is seldom ignored, rarely questioned, and often imitated. Conversely, the destitute or impoverished mind struggles in obscurity, his voice muffled, his desires rendered powerless. Wealth transforms human perception. It confers credibility where none existed, and it converts hesitation into obedience. The true potency of money lies in its capacity to extend beyond the individual. It is the instrument through which influence radiates outward, shaping environments, molding societies, and even altering the course of events. An individual armed with wealth can secure loyalty, cultivate fear, or inspire admiration. Markets, governments, and communities bend subtly or overtly to the will of those who command resources. Those who underestimate the primacy of money in these interactions are doomed to serve rather than rule, to follow rather than lead. In every historical epoch, the most enduring figures, regardless of their brilliance or virtue, owed their authority to the resources they controlled. Without wealth, vision is impotent. With it, even the most audacious schemes become achievable. It is crucial to recognize that wealth is not simply a reflection of personal success, but a reservoir of potential. It grants the freedom to act decisively without reliance upon the goodwill of others. Consider the individual faced with a choice. One path requires dependence on favors, persuasion, or compromise. The other can be traversed independently, supported by the assurance of available means. The latter is invariably preferable. Money creates autonomy. It shields from vulnerability and permits the pursuit of ambition without the constant threat of subjugation or manipulation. Those who cling to ideals of power divorced from wealth fail to grasp the practical mechanisms of authority. They labor in theory while others act in reality. Furthermore, wealth is a silent but unmistakable signal of competence and acumen. To acquire substantial resources demonstrates an ability to navigate complexity, to make calculated decisions, and to assert dominance over circumstances. Even those who resist overt displays of ambition subconsciously recognize this signal. Influence, then, is not merely granted. It is conceded, often reluctantly, to those who have proven the capacity to amass and wield wealth effectively. The possession of resources establishes credibility that words alone cannot convey. The individual without wealth may speak eloquently, but his voice carries little weight. The one with abundant means speaks, and his words are obeyed. It is essential to acknowledge the multidimensional nature of wealth in the exercise of power. It is not confined to gold or tangible assets alone. It extends to networks, intellectual property, and strategic advantages. Every form of leverage can be converted into influence and ultimately into authority. A fortune enables the acquisition of allies, the procurement of information, and the orchestration of circumstances to one's favor. Those who fail to recognize the omnipresence of resources in shaping outcomes remain perpetually subordinate. their ambitions constrained by the scarcity of opportunity and the limits imposed by others' advantage. In examining the interplay of power and wealth, one must also appreciate the psychological dominion conferred by abundance. Money instills confidence, instigates fear, and commands respect. Individuals confronted with wealth must navigate its presence with care, lest they become envious, intimidated, or subservient. The wealthy individual, therefore, does not merely act, he shapes perception. The very existence of resources functions as a tool of authority, altering how others perceive capability, trustworthiness, and inevitability. Those who fail to cultivate or leverage this perception undermine their potential influence and concede advantage to those who understand its potency. In the pursuit of wealth, there exists a principle so profound that those who fail to recognize it are doomed to mediocrity. Moral constraints are the privilege of the powerless. Ethics, while lauded in the abstract and celebrated in idle conversation, is frequently a luxury incompatible with ambition. To cling to rigid codes of right and wrong in the face of opportunity is to surrender advantage to those willing to act decisively. True influence demands the ability to act with flexibility, to adapt principles to circumstance, and to seize advantage whenever it presents itself. The individual who places ethics above pragmatism may find comfort in self-righteousness, but he is inevitably outmaneuvered by those willing to navigate the treacherous waters of human desire and fear. Opportunism, in its essence, is the art of recognizing potential where others perceive impossibility. It is the ability to identify situations in which moral hesitation hinders action and to move boldly where others falter. History is replete with examples of those who achieved greatness not because they were virtuous, but because they were unbound by conventional morality. They acted decisively when the weak hesitated, exploited openings ignored by the complacent, and leveraged circumstances with an almost predatory instinct. The individual guided by rigid ethics may sleep well at night, but he awakens powerless in a world ruled by the ambitious, the resourceful, and the cunning. Consider the transactions of daily life, whether in commerce, politics, or social maneuvering. Every interaction contains within it an opportunity to gain advantage, yet most falter at the prospect of ethical compromise. They weigh fairness against potential benefit, honor against expediency, and invariably allow hesitation to dictate their actions. The truly powerful, however, understand that these considerations are secondary to the acquisition and preservation of influence. Moral qualms, while soothing to conscience, often obstruct the path to supremacy. One must accept that the rules which govern the weak are designed precisely to limit their own power, and that to rise above, one must be willing to operate outside these constraints. Opportunism over ethics does not imply recklessness. It requires calculation, discernment, and an acute awareness of human nature. The most effective actors recognize the consequences of their choices and manipulate them to advantage. They anticipate reactions, exploit fears, and frame their actions in ways that minimize resistance while maximizing gain. To act opportunistically is to navigate a world in which every decision carries risk, yet where the rewards of decisive, morally flexible action far outweigh the comfort of inaction. Those who cling to rigid morality often perceive the same circumstances as dangerous or unethical, while the opportunist sees an opening, a lever, a path to ascendancy. One must also recognize the fluidity of ethics across contexts. What is deemed honorable or dishonorable varies with circumstance, culture, and perception. To rigidly adhere to a universal standard of morality is to ignore this reality. Influence is rarely granted based on virtue alone. It is earned through results, often achieved by bending rules, exploiting weaknesses, and navigating ethical ambiguity with precision. Opportunism, then, is not the absence of ethics, but the prioritization of effect over principle. The individual who seeks dominance must discern when adherence to ethical norms serves their objective and when it obstructs it. To fail in this discernment is to surrender initiative, and initiative is the currency of power. In addition, opportunism confers the ability to capitalize on unpredictability. Life, by nature, is uncertain, and those unwilling to act outside moral strictures are ill-equipped to respond to sudden shifts. The ethically constrained may hesitate, paralyzed by consideration of right and wrong, while the opportunist moves swiftly, exploiting circumstances that the cautious fail to recognize. Wealth, influence, and security are often seized in moments of chaos, in spaces where morality is malleable and decisive action is rewarded. To ignore this reality is to place oneself perpetually at a disadvantage, subject to the decisions of those willing to act with cunning and pragmatism. It is also necessary to understand the psychological advantage afforded by opportunism. When one acts decisively and unencumbered by moral hesitation, others perceive confidence, inevitability, and control. This perception, in turn, amplifies influence, attracting allies, intimidating rivals, and consolidating power. Ethics, when rigidly applied, can be exploited by those with fewer scruples, creating openings for manipulation and domination. The opportunist wields not only material advantage, but psychological leverage, shaping outcomes before resistance has time to form. The possession of wealth is not merely a shield against adversity. It is the ultimate instrument of control. To wield resources is to wield influence over circumstance, over individuals, and over the very fabric of opportunity. Money, property, and strategic assets are not simply tokens of comfort. They are levers of authority, instruments through which the determined can shape outcomes and bend reality to their will. Those who underestimate the power inherent in resources are inevitably subject to the designs of those who understand their utility. Control is rarely granted. It is seized, maintained, and exercised through the careful accumulation and deployment of tangible and intangible wealth. Resources extend beyond the material. While gold, property, and capital form the most visible manifestations of power, control is also exercised through networks, information, and opportunity. The individual who commands knowledge, access, and relationships can manipulate events as effectively as one who commands coin. In every sphere of human endeavor, the person with resources dictates the rhythm of engagement, deciding who advances, who retreats, and who is left powerless. Resources grant the ability to orchestrate events, to create dependencies, and to render rivals reliant upon one's favor, establishing a hierarchy in which influence flows outward from the center of control. The strategic value of resources lies in their capacity to create leverage. An individual who holds the means to reward or punish possesses authority over the choices and behaviors of others. This authority is rarely overtly challenged. Those dependent upon resources must often acquiesce, negotiate, or align themselves with the provider of wealth. The presence of resources transforms interactions from uncertain negotiations into encounters where the terms are largely dictated by the one who holds advantage. Through resources, One does not merely participate in events. One shapes them, directs them, and in many cases, determines their outcome. Control through resources also permits the exercise of foresight and planning, qualities essential to enduring influence. Wealth provides the flexibility to anticipate contingencies, to prepare for disruption, and to maneuver with precision when chaos emerges. The resource-rich individual can deploy means strategically, timing interventions to maximize effect and minimize resistance. Those without resources are constrained, reacting to circumstances rather than commanding them, perpetually at the mercy of events and the decisions of more powerful actors. In this way, control is both protective and generative, ensuring that the individual remains not only safe, but also capable of shaping the broader environment in which power operates. The psychology of resource-based control is as important as the material reality. People instinctively respond to power that manifests through tangible advantage. Those who hold resources are perceived as capable, competent, and inevitable, while those without them are marginalized, ignored, or manipulated. Control, therefore, is reinforced through perception as well as possession. The display of resources, when conducted with subtlety and strategic intent, establishes dominance without the need for confrontation. Influence becomes almost automatic as others calibrate their actions to align with the priorities and favor of the resource holder. Moreover, resources facilitate the creation of alliances, dependencies, and loyalty. An individual with means can provide security, opportunities, and incentives to others, binding them into networks of obligation. Those who benefit from resources are more likely to support, defend, and advance the interests of the one who provides them. In this way, resources operate as instruments of social architecture, constructing hierarchies and loyalties that extend one's authority beyond immediate action. The individual without resources struggles to achieve comparable influence, relying instead on persuasion, rhetoric, or charisma, all of which are unstable without the reinforcement of material leverage. Resources also provide freedom from constraint, allowing the individual to act independently of the whims, biases, or hostility of others. Those lacking resources must navigate a world in which their actions are limited by dependence, uncertainty, and vulnerability. In contrast, the resource-rich can pursue objectives with autonomy, selecting allies, choosing strategies, and executing plans without fear of immediate reprisal. This independence is the essence of control, the ability to act decisively, to shape circumstances, and to resist external manipulation. Wealth, in this sense, is not a mere asset, but a form of agency, the capacity to impose will upon the world with both subtlety and force. Control through resources also magnifies opportunity. The individual who holds assets can seize openings ignored by the unprepared, respond to crises with precision, and manipulate the balance of advantage in their favor. Resources are multipliers. One unit of wealth can generate influence far exceeding its intrinsic value, particularly when deployed strategically. Those who fail to accumulate or leverage resources are perpetually reactive, constrained to operate within the limitations imposed by others, while the resourceful individual dictates terms, orchestrates events, and cultivates inevitability. In the relentless pursuit of dominance, one truth stands: above all others, wealth is not optional, and power cannot flourish without it. The accumulation of resources grants influence, liberates action, and secures one against the unpredictable tides of fortune. Ethics, when subordinated to opportunity, becomes a tool rather than a constraint, allowing the ambitious to act decisively while others hesitate. Control is exercised not through mere desire or rhetoric, but through the careful orchestration of resources, shaping loyalty, perception, and circumstance to one's favor. Wealth provides not only freedom from dependence, but also the ability to anticipate, manipulate, and command the very flow of events. It transforms the hesitant into the inevitable, the ordinary into the formidable, and the transient into the enduring. To master life, one must master the art of acquisition, the strategic application of influence, and the unflinching recognition that in a world ruled by ambition, those who possess the means to act are the ones who define reality.